incredible sharing platter includes Balochi Saji whole chicken, chapel kebab, kabli pilau rice, Balochi lamb karahi, chicken karahi, keema karahi, and much, much more. It's Mumtaz quality, now even more affordable. Find us at Mackenzie House, Chadwick Street, Leeds. Book your table via WhatsApp on 07399 786 786.
Gems and jewels. Wise sayings, interesting events, and moral lessons from Islamic history. Words of wisdom.
Junaid was asked about thankfulness, and he said, "To not use one of Allah's blessings for the purpose of disobeying Him." Hassan Basri said, "I met with people who deemed the world to be less important than the earth underneath their feet. One of them would own only enough sustenance to maintain his
broadcasting 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. This is Salam Radio.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning and welcome to Globally Local.
Globally Local on 106.2 FM. Your city, your world, and your chance to make a difference.
Yes, welcome to the show Globally Local on Salam Radio 106.2 FM and online, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. I'm your host Joe Hosted, and as always we'll be discussing local approaches to global issues. We do try when possible to focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 ambitious goals that set out to bring an end to poverty, reduce world hunger, address inequality, combat climate change and ultimately leave no one behind. Today is World Wildlife Day, and tomorrow marks a very special day in Peterborough history. The city will be holding its first ever Climate Action Day, where citizens, businesses, and indeed everybody is invited to change one aspect of their daily life to reduce their CO2 emissions. Today, with the theme Climate Action, we'll be talking about what we can do on a local level to help slow down the effects of climate change. Climate change is now affecting every country on the continent. Weather patterns are changing, sea levels are rising, weather events are becoming more extreme, and greenhouse gas emissions are now at their highest levels in history. Doing nothing will end up costing us a lot more than if we take action now. We have an opportunity to take actions that will lead to more jobs, greater prosperity, and better lives for all, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and building climate resilience. The time is now 11:02, and don't be shy, we want to hear from you, so please do let us know any comments or questions you have during the show. You can reach us on WhatsApp 07745 278 978 or on Facebook at Salam Radio. Joining us in the studio today is Man About Nature, Richard Ferris from Earth Matters. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Joe. Hi, listeners.
Tomorrow is the first ever Peterborough Climate Action Day. So before we get into it, what is climate change?
Okay, I think one of the things we have to start off by explaining to people is climate is not the same as weather. So people often say, well, I don't believe in all this climate change stuff because today was hot, yesterday was cold, today's hot, it rained yesterday or whatever. Climate is a long-term thing. So climate change is a long-term shift in average weather conditions across the world. And since around the late 1700s, early 1800s, humans have contributed to the release of an increasing amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And, I know this is still a bit sort of sciencey for a lot of people. Let's simplify it. The greenhouse effect, if you've ever been in a glass greenhouse, you'll know that when you walk inside, you're struck by how much warmer it is than outside. That's because the sun's rays come down and they are trapped inside that glass house. Normally, if you didn't have that glass there, the rays are reflected back into space and a lot of energy is lost. Now, as the sun's rays pass through our atmosphere, some of them are reflected back into space, allowing the Earth to cool down. However, some of them are trapped by carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that's a good thing because without the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the Earth could be about 30 degrees cooler than it is now, and that wouldn't be good for life.
Right.
But the problem is, as you get more of these greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and others, it traps more and more of the sun's heat inside our atmosphere, causing us, if you like, to boil in a bag. And the whole planet warms up as a consequence of this, and this is what's known as climate change or global warming.
So the problem is that there's so much CO2 trapped between the surface of the Earth and our ozone layer. Is that right?
Yeah, and the point is, it's reached a high. You said in your introduction, it's now reached a high level of 415 parts per million, which is the highest it's ever been in human history. And we're not just talking about recorded history here, not just since the invention of agriculture, but since before modern humans even existed millions of years ago. So this is very unusual.
Unprecedented, isn't it?
It
It's the word
is.
I keep hearing
Yes.
in the news in relation
Yeah.
to climate change. So who then is most affected by the effects of climate change?
Well, let's be perfectly honest about it. Climate change is going to do for all of us if we don't tackle it, but it has a disproportionate impact on the global poor. We've got a growing urban population on the planet, and by the middle of the century, it could be as many as 80% of the world's population live in cities. Many of them live in what we call mega cities. These are large cities, mainly in Asia, places like Shanghai, Mumbai, etc. And if you look at the elevation of these cities, they're often coastal cities, which are going to be very, very prone to sea level rise, which is going to be one of the consequences of global warming as the ice caps melt and seawater expands.
Yeah.
4 in every 5 people living in megacities live in Asia, so that as a continent, Asia is going to take a massive hit, and we're talking about 50 to 100 years. So we're not talking a long time.
Yeah. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the rising sea levels? What's causing it, and what effect is that having on the environment?
Okay, rising sea levels is a really serious issue for us because, as you will be aware, the large proportion of this planet we're called the blue planet for a reason, is water. And across the globe, average sea level has increased by 3.6 millimetres per year since 2005, right? 3.6 millimetres. Now, that's a tiny, tiny amount, okay? But year on year, that's happening, and it's accelerating. We've been seeing what we call sea ice reducing for decades now. Since the early 2000s, we've seen the polar caps melting at record amounts, giant icebergs falling off ice shelves, disconnecting from the ice pack, as large as countries in Europe, as large as Belgium, you know. And what we're going to see is that stuff is going to melt, and sea level rise is going to become it is a reality already, and it's also going to affect us here in the UK. There was a study I saw published online in the last few days which shows that we're going to lose a lot of our beaches, and we're going to see increased coastal erosion. And when you look at where it's going to happen, it's going to be largely around the south and east of the UK, around southeast England, around the Norfolk, Suffolk, Kent, Essex coasts. And you know, so the ice melts, adds to the water rises. Already across the world now, we're seeing in many Pacific island states, people are having to be evacuated. Many people have left some of the tiny islands in the Pacific and have now been rehomed in Australia and New Zealand. So the reality for those communities is it's here and now. Their very homes are disappearing.
Well, we have to remember that we are an island. We are a tiny island, and it's served us well in the past. It's protected us from a lot of things, but you know, at rising sea levels, we're going to be in trouble.
Yes,
to say the least.
And you can't go on building concrete walls around the coast to protect yourself. No. It's just not feasible. In fact, it's not desirable for many reasons. If you've been over to parts of East Anglia, you'll be aware of coastal erosion, cliffs dropping away, houses disappearing into the sea, and I don't know, you'd have to be living on another planet not to have noticed the storms we've been having in the past 2-3 months. Much more increased storminess, and that's another characteristic of this climate change phenomenon.
And we rely on these ice caps for our fresh drinking water, don't we?
we rely on glaciers and snow in places like the Himalayas for a lot of the drinking water for surrounding countries, India, Pakistan, places like Kashmir, etc. And obviously there's the knock-on effect it's going to have on wildlife. But as the snow and ice melts, as you're obviously aware, snow is white. When the sun shines on that heat is reflected back. We lose that snow. That's the snow and ice, then actually you end up with darker, what you call an albedo. So you end up with a land surface which is darker, or the sea, and that absorbs the heat rather than bouncing it back. So it just exacerbates the problem.
Oh, wow. Okay. So let's move on then and talk about carbon footprint. What is a carbon footprint?
Carbon footprint is, if you think about it, it's your what impact your lifestyle is having. It's the total amount of greenhouse gases produced to directly and indirectly support human activities, and it's usually expressed in equivalent tons of CO2. You can go online and you can calculate the impact that your lifestyle has in terms of CO2 emissions. In other words, it's things like when you drive a car, the engine burns fuel, creating a certain amount of CO2, depending on its fuel consumption, the age and the driving distance you're doing. When you heat your house with oil, gas or coal, you're also generating CO2. And even if you heat your house with electricity, the generation of that electrical power may also have emitted a certain amount of CO2. When you buy food and other goods, the production of the food and goods also emitted some quantities of CO2. Now, I don't know if people are interested at home, but just to give you an example, the following activities would contribute 1 kilogram of CO2 to your personal carbon footprint. Travel by public transport for up to 7 miles, a train or bus. Drive your car 3 3/4 miles. Fly in a plane for 1.3 miles. Operate a computer for 32 hours. The production of 5 plastic bags, the production of 2 plastic bottles. So these things are all equivalents, and you can see then how you can make choices about how you live and how that would reduce your carbon impact, your carbon footprint.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest CO2 emitters is fuel. It's fossil fuels, isn't it?
Yes.
So let's just talk about that for a second. Am I right in thinking that fossil fuel oil is fossils of dinosaurs that from millions of years ago that we're now digging up to heat our homes? Is that
dinosaurs will be a slight exaggeration, because much of the oil deposits in the earth are the results of the preservation of tiny microscopic organisms that lived millions and millions of years ago and got converted through pressure into oil. And you've got the same with coal from old fossilized plant material. And so these things contain carbon, because carbon is the basis of all our life forms. And now, by utilising them, we're releasing that carbon back into the atmosphere.
And it's not part of our current... there's 2 carbon cycles, isn't there? There's a short term and a long term. And when those fossil fuels are in the ground, they become part of the long term.
Yes.
And what we're doing is digging that up and putting it into our short term, which is why the planet's getting hotter and hotter.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of them as like carbon stores, and actually, given the situation we're faced with, they really should be left there to be carbon stores and not converted into this put into this short-term cycle and increase emissions that result.
Yeah. If you are listening online now, and if your boss isn't watching, then I would urge you to go to www.footprintcalculator.org, which is a really useful tool that tells you, it asks you questions on your lifestyle, what food you eat, how you get around, what type of house you live in, and then it calculates your CO2 footprint. And it tells you things like how many planets we would need if everybody lived like you, and it tells you when your own personal Earth overshoot day is. Richard, would you like to clarify what an Earth overshoot day is?
Okay, imagine if we all carry on living unsustainable lifestyles and we just do our own thing. The planet can only take so much, so Earth overshoot day for an individual is when you've reached the limit of your bank account for carbon emissions. Okay, so hopefully most of us can get through 9-10 months of the year. But if you're leading a very carbon intensive lifestyle whereby you fly a lot, where you eat food that's imported from different parts of the world, where you drive a car a lot, you may well find that you're only getting 6 months of the year in and you're over your individual allowance.
Wow. So time to budget.
Yeah, and it's this whole idea of looking at carbon footprint. Whilst I wouldn't want people to start shaming their work colleagues and family, adding an element of competition can make it fun. Because let's be serious for a moment. Climate change is a very frightening concept for many people, and it also feels like it's out of our hands and out of our control. There are lots of little things we can do. And by looking at your carbon footprint and turning it into maybe an office competition, see who can reduce theirs the most that month.
Yeah.
And give a little prize, as long as it's carbon neutral, you understand?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you've said that, because it is about us all working together. It's about us all making changes to our daily lives, making small changes. And it's not about shaming people, because, so often I hear people say, "Aren't you vegan? What are you doing with a plastic bottle then? Don't you care about the environment either?" And it's when someone decides to do something good like that, to become vegan or to cut down on their meat, people instantly get defensive and they start questioning, well, if you're doing that, why aren't you doing this? And I think maybe it's time for us all just to take a chill pill and calm down, and let's just all try and work together to get through this climate crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah? Let's each look for something we can do, and it's got to be. There's a certain amount of pain involved, obviously, but it's got to be achievable for people to get them on the hook for doing these sorts of things. And it's a step-by-step process. We can't expect everybody to switch overnight to becoming vegans, to refusing to flight, and what have you. So little steps, and celebrate those little steps.
Small steps. And this is why tomorrow we've got the March 4th for the Environment Climate Action Day in Peterborough, where we're inviting people to make just one amendment to their daily routine that will cut down their CO2 emission. Start small and then let's see what happens. That being said, in July 2019, Peterborough declared a climate emergency, which, let's be honest, was pretty anticlimactic, to say the least. But now here we are, the day before Peterborough's Climate Action Day. And this has all come from the Peterborough Carbon Management Action Plan. Richard, have you had a chance to read it?
I have.
Okay.
I mean, it's let's be fair. It's a laudable thing, and a local authority having a carbon action plan. I think we can be critical that lots of local authorities have been rather slow in the uptake of this, and it's down to a lot of pressure from consumers, from local residents, and from prominent campaigners. It starts off in a great way, talking about we can't go on in ignorance of the fact our climate is changing. Couldn't agree more. The council claimed to have a good record at promoting and delivering on environment matters. I think we could debate that long into the night. And they talk about action locally making a difference. That's fantastic. But when you get into the detail of the plan, it's what I would say. It's not a smart plan. There aren't deadline dates, so there's nothing you can actually hold people to account on. And I think we're in a situation where we need to see real civic leadership, because if we're going to expect residents to adopt more sustainable, climate-friendly lifestyles, they need some leadership. They need to see authorities, local government, national government taking radical action. And I read through this, and I found nothing on transport policy whatsoever. There's no pledge to work with the bus operators to introduce clean bus fleets, for example. There's nothing on investing in cycling and walking infrastructure and reducing traffic congestion. There's nothing on things like park and ride and maybe pedestrianising areas of the city. There's nothing too on housing and industrial development. How are we going to ensure that new housing and industrial units are carbon neutral? And disappointingly, as a greenie that I am, there's nothing on urban green space and parks. So there are some ideas in there, and a lot of the pledges are things which I think the council were planning on doing anyway, which they've wrapped up into this plan. But that all that said, at least we've now got a plan, and I would suggest to people, if you feel strongly about this issue, hold your council, your elected representatives to account. Doesn't matter what party they're from. This is not a party political issue. Climate change is too important for that. Let's see if we can make this into something that really is out there leading the way, because we claim to be environment capital. That suggests that we're the leaders in the country. I personally would challenge that, but let's hold them to account, and let's make them work at this, working in partnership, putting pressure on, doing bottom-up local initiatives to support what the council wants to do.
Absolutely. And just like the global goals we have spanning from the 2030 agenda, which is where the global goals come from, these 17 goals with the deadline of 2030, because that's what scientists say is the deadline for having to make anything change. Net zero by 2050 isn't good enough, is it? Anywhere, because by the time we get to 2030, we've done irreversible damage.
Yeah, I think that this is the problem. With climate change, you're locked into it, you see. There's certain things that have happened, and I mentioned melting of the ice sheet. You can't suddenly refreeze it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to have to go with the flow to some extent. And if we don't take radical action in the next 10 years, scientists are telling us that 1.5 degrees of warming will be surpassed easily. We'll be in the 3 to 4 to 5 degrees of warming, and that really is terrifying.
Yes, so Climate Action Day tomorrow, and we all need to club together to make this a success. Everybody needs to make pledges, everybody needs to make amendments to their daily life, and let us know what's going on with you. Richard, tell us a bit about your Creating Waves of Change, because you've been doing this campaign of pledging for a couple of years, haven't you?
Yeah, with Earth Matters, my green consultancy, sustainability consultancy, I have this thing called Creating the Waves of Change, and I've asked people to pledge what they will do, what single action they will do to create the waves of change in their lives. And it can be climate change related, it can be to do with saving plants and animals, etc. So I asked people to make a simple pledge using the hashtag Create the Waves of Change, and then take a photograph of that pledge, put it up on social media. I give out pledge cards that people can stick on their wall, on their fridge or whatever, to show what they've promised to do. Not to beat them up, but just as a gentle reminder each day that, I've pledged perhaps to have one meat-free day a week, or I've pledged to use public transport and leave the car at home, things like that. So simple things we all need to just remind ourselves each day to try to stick to.
Yes, fantastic. Well, I've got some pledges here from some members of the City Council. Marco Sereste has pledged to go vegetarian for the day.
Wow, good man.
Fantastic. John Holditch has gone one better. He's going vegan.
Oh, there's a competitive element I can see there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good for John. I hope he's got some good cookbooks.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can really open up your recipe book, can't you? Your vision of what you're going to eat when you change your diet like this. Yeah. Mohammed Farouk is going to have cold showers. Or colder showers, let's say. I imagine it's not going to be a stark cold shower. Reusable carrier bag. And another interesting one is turning down the heating 2 degrees. This is, I find, an interesting point, because I quite often see comedy sketches about human beings and about our obsession with the temperature, and if it's 1 degree too cold, no, that won't do. And this is a common argument in the workplace, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've worked in buildings where the thermostat's been taped up, and it says, if you want to change the heating, you have to come and see whoever. It's just so fascinating how this happens.
Well, I worked in an office in a building where the conservation organisation I was working for had floors 2 and 3. But on the ground floor and floor 1 was a well-known firm of solicitors, and they used to like the heating in the building ramped right up. And I realised one day the reason for that was they didn't like wearing knitwear. because they all wanted to look very smart, so people were dressed in very smart clothing. Whereas on our floors, we're all walking around in woolly jumpers, etc. Feeling really overheated. But it's quite funny if you look in an ordinary domestic house situation, you'll get some people that like the heating up, others like it down, and sometimes you get partners in couples that one turns the heating up a tad, the next one sneaks by, turns it back down.
That's it.
My message is 1 degree, 2 degrees. To be honest, if people can detect it that closely, there's that. Well, I don't believe it. Put a jumper on, for heaven's sake.
Well, this is it, isn't it? Growing up, I mean, has heating got cheaper? Much cheaper? Because when I was growing up, I was told to put a jumper on.
Yes, and let's be perfectly honest. Nobody needs to heat their house to more than 18 degrees C. I've been in homes where it's the thermostat's ramped up to 25. Now, come on, guys, that's not natural. That's a hot summer's day.
Absolutely, invest in some better clothing, I would say. And lastly, Gillian Beasley is going plastic free. So, Richard, just tell us how going plastic free can help the environment.
Well, plastic, what's plastic made from? Plastic is a derivative of oils, and anything that involves making plastic involves using oil and using lots of energy, emitting carbon. The other issue with plastic is the stuff doesn't biodegrade very quickly. Plastic bottles take between 400 and 700 years in landfill. So Gillian's pledge, that's a very ambitious pledge actually, because if you look around the room we're in at the moment, and listeners at home, and if you're in your car, you look at the amount of plastic around you, take all that away, there wouldn't be a lot left.
Yeah.
But we do need to deplastify our lifestyles. So big it up for Gillian Beasley. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you making a pledge, Richard?
I'm making a pledge not to fly at all this year.
Wow.
For anything at all.
Okay. To keep your CO2 emissions, because the CO2 emissions from planes are huge,
shocking. Yeah, and I'm trying to plan a summer holiday involving trains, which is going down really well at home.
Yeah. Well, Interrail's a fantastic concept.
Yes.
So you are listening to Globally Local on 106.2 FM. If you've got any comments or questions, you can reach us on WhatsApp 07745 278 978 or on the Facebook Live video. We'll be back soon to carry on talking about Climate Action Day tomorrow, the 4th of March.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.
Are you looking to kickstart a career in health and social care? If you're over the age of 18 and currently in receipt of an in or out of work benefit, the Health and Care Sector Work Academy is offering you the chance to gain a qualification for free. There's plenty of support available, as we can cover childcare and travel costs, and mentoring after the course has finished to help you into employment or further learning. Get in touch with us on 0800 310 1160 to join one of our courses and learn more about what we have to offer. Peterborough has a fresh new restaurant. Big Mouth on Lincoln Road is now open. Fantastic fresh food, pizzas, gourmet burgers, fried chicken, grilled chicken, wraps and sides. Mouth-watering food at great prices. Come and experience the freshness and taste of our amazing food. On a lunch break, try our Big Mouth lunch special menu from 12 to 4. Fancy our Hot Mouth Big Burger or our Big Mouth special pizza? Try us and taste the difference. Eat in, take away or order online at getbigmouth.co.uk for delivery with Just Eat and Deliveroo. We cater for birthday parties, family bookings and events. Follow Big Mouth Lads on Facebook and Instagram. Big Mouth, 349 Lincoln Road, Peterborough, PE1 2PF. Call 01733 20 10 20. We're open 12 till late every day.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shabina here. Has your child had their flu vaccination this year? All primary school-aged children are entitled to the flu vaccine in their schools, helping to protect you and all the family against flu, which can make vulnerable people very ill. Call the school immunisations team on 0300 555 5055 if you'd like your child to get protected.
Allah
In the mood for some authentic Desi food? Try Desi Restaurant on Lincoln Road. Start your day right with our Desi breakfast. Every day from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Halva puri, channa, nihari, paya, paratha and omelette. Need a tasty lunch? Every day 1 to 4 p.m. we've got fast food, pizzas, kebab sandwiches, tandoori dishes, balti dishes, biryanis and much more. We're also open every evening 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. Try our Desi Tawa special or our fresh handi, 1 kg chicken or lamb on the bone, cooked to order. Eat in, take away or free delivery. Visit desirestaurant.co.uk to view the full menu and order online. 60-seat capacity and a private function room. Catering service also available. Desi Restaurant, 298 Lincoln Road, Peterborough, PE1 2ND. Call us now on 555 795.
कोई रत्तियां कमीज़ानी लमाना मारे मामा मिठियां में चीज़ानी।
मेरा नाम मुकद्दस है और कोट मेरा घर है और ये मेरे लिए किसी जन्नत से कम नहीं। हमारे भी कुछ ख्वाब हैं जिनकी ताबीर को हमें पाना है।
आइए इन बच्चों के ताबनाक मुस्तकबिल के लिए अपना हिस्सा डालिए। अपनी ज़कात, सदकात, खैरात और इमदाद कोट को दीजिए।
UK number 0300-123-7774. Website court.org.uk.
My name is Khalid Siddiq.
I'm Saif Adam.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Baraka Blue.
Yo, this is your boy Harris J, and make sure you guys stay tuned to Salam Radio 106.2 FM.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to the show Globally Local, where we explore ways in which we can create a better world for all life on Earth. We do try when possible to base our conversations around the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, 17 ambitious goals that set out to end poverty, reduce inequality and tackle climate change. I'm Joe Hosted, and this week we're preparing for Peterborough's first ever Climate Action Day, which takes place tomorrow. Climate change is a real and undeniable threat to our entire civilization. The effects are already visible and will be catastrophic unless we act now. Through education, innovation and adherence to our climate commitments, we can make the necessary changes to protect the planet. These changes also provide huge opportunities to modernise our infrastructure, which will create new jobs and promote greater prosperity across the globe. What changes can you make to your daily life to reduce your emissions? Have you made a pledge to take action on climate catastrophe? If so, we want to hear from you. The time is now 11:31, and make sure you get your comments in over the next 25 minutes. You can reach us on WhatsApp 07745 278 978 or on Facebook at Salam Radio. We are of course joined today by Mr. Sustainable himself, Richard Ferris from Earth Matters.
Hi Joe.
Always a pleasure to have you here, Richard.
Thanks Joe, thank you.
I'd like to continue the show with a few reasons that we know that we're in a climate crisis. So our summers and winters are getting warmer. Indonesia is having to move its capital because its current one is sinking due to rising sea levels. The average wildlife population has dropped by 60% in just 40 years, which is awful. There is more CO2 in our atmosphere than ever before. Earth Overshoot Day gets earlier and earlier every year. Carbon emissions from energy are rising at the fastest rate since 2011. And 120,000 square kilometres of tropical forest were lost in 2018. Forestation has taken a huge hit this year and last year, hasn't it, Richard?
Yeah, it's and it's not as if we've not been warned about this. Forests are huge stores of carbon. They do a fantastic climate regulation job for us, because whereas we breathe out CO2, trees absorb CO2 and use it in the process that they have called photosynthesis, from which they make their organic matter, they get their energy. And so there's a balance, and removing particularly large tropical rainforests such as the Amazon majorly affects climatic patterns around the globe. And we've seen political change in Brazil, which has led to the election of a guy who has no appreciation, it seems, of the value of those tropical rainforests and is after a fast buck. And so there's been really rapid deforestation of parts of Amazonia under Bolsonaro's regime, and it's a great concern.
Absolutely. So we've spoken about what climate change is and about the knock-on effect that our personal carbon footprints have. But let's start talking about how we can make a difference. Let's start talking about emissions in energy. Let's talk about what causes CO2 emissions in using energy, and then how we can combat that in our everyday lives.
Okay, put simply, energy. We are a very energy-hungry species. We seem to show no sign of slowing down in our energy demands. And you've got two basic forms of energy. You've got non-renewables and you've got renewables. Now, non-renewables are things that once they're used up, they've gone. So fossil fuels, as they're called. So we dig out, we extract oil, we extract coal from the ground, and now it seems we're now hell-bent on extracting gas through a process called fracking. You burn those materials, they give off CO2. You get energy from burning them, obviously, but you don't get that stuff back, So we really shouldn't be locked into still using fossil fuels, and there's a lot of pressure by campaigners to step away from non-renewables, and yet we've got people around the world still saying, well, we're going to extract the last bit of coal from the ground that we can. And we see that in Australia, we see it in China. We even had a planning application in Cumbria recently, which was passed by Cumbria County Council for some open cast coal mining. On the other hand, we've got renewable energy, things such as wind, such as solar. So they're almost energy for free.
There's so many forms of renewable energy, isn't there? Like you say, solar and wind, but even hydropower is a huge thing. We actually use a lot of hydropower in the UK, don't we?
We not so much hydro. There are some hydro schemes. I mean, there are hydroelectric plants in Snowdonia.
This is where they're putting generators to capture the velocity of the river. Is that right?
That's right. Yes. Yes. But we talk about being a small island. We're surrounded by some of the windiest offshore conditions anywhere. So actually, sticking offshore wind farms out in the North Sea and out there in the Wash and in the Atlantic is a really great way, energy for free for us, and many Scandinavian countries have seized this opportunity. We live in a place where we've got a very Atlantic climate, so we get lots of wind. Let's exploit that. Let's use it. And also solar energy technology has advanced so much that you can generate incredible amounts of power from relatively low amounts of sunlight. You don't need to be in the middle of the Sahara Desert to be generating solar power. And, I'd like to see all public buildings retrofitted with solar panels where that's possible. And certainly all new developments should have them on.
And battery storage has come a long way, hasn't it? Which means we can store energy more efficiently. One thing I saw a while ago, and I've been obsessed with it since, is an LED light that you can get for your bathroom or wherever, and you stick it on the wall, and it has a little string that goes through it, and to turn it on, you pull the string, and then the LED uses the kinetic energy of the weight on the other side of the string to pull it back to power the LED.
Oh, okay, nice.
I mean, I was blown away by it. I thought, that's it. That's I'm going to light my entire home with them. So then how can we reduce our emissions through using energy? One thing I will just say is leaving items on standby is a huge thing that people don't realise. Most people do it, your TV, leave your phone, and things like this. That's one easy thing, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unplugging appliances. I think if you walk into most modern homes now, let's imagine, hypothetically, you're a burglar, you break into someone's home, the number of lights that are on. Yeah. Kitchen light, little lights in the kitchen, in your living room, your TV, your DVD player, whatever, So things can be turned off. It's interesting that children, they do some of the schools locally do power down days, and the kids are very good at telling parents turn off lights, unplug appliances. But as they get older, they enter teenagehood, they adopt adult habits, and so you'll find lights on all the time. So it's a bit of a challenge with a teenager. But turning off lights, unplugging appliances, properly insulating your home. There's quite a lot of old housing stock in this city, and it's really energy inefficient, and people are paying lots of money for gas central heating, and much of that heat is just going out the windows, out the roofs. Use of smart controls where possible, where people can afford it, and there used to be schemes to support this. Get solar panels on your property. We talked earlier about keeping your heating down below 18 degrees. It's not necessary to have it up in the mid-20s. 15% of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions come from heating our homes, so it's a significant contribution.
One thing I've got installed in my kitchen is a sensor. I've got an LED light on a sensor, so as soon as I leave, 10 seconds and it's off. There is no leaving a light on. Which I would highly recommend.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we've spoken about energy. Now another big one is transport. Probably one of the biggest CO2 emitters is people needing to get around, and not only getting around, doing it faster than everybody else. Cutting your commute time down. So how is transport emitting CO2 into the atmosphere?
Well, again, we talk about burning of fuel, and again, it's burning of fossil fuels. Aircraft burning kerosene, and cars burning petrol and diesel, and so anything that gets away from that and moves to things like electric vehicles, electric trains. It is tricky for people to make the transition, because at the moment I think the cheapest fully electric car on the market comes in at about 25 grand, and it's not a large family car either. But people can go over to hybrids, and so you can do your shorter journeys using the battery power, and longer journeys using fuel. That's one way forward. Certainly we're starting to see some changes in the taxi fleet here in the city. I've noticed an increasing number of electric vehicles, which is fantastic. I don't want to let them off the hook entirely, because I would say one of the things that is a gripe of mine is taxi drivers and also ordinary residents who leave their engines idling. It's not necessary, guys and ladies and gentlemen, to sit at the side of the road with your engine running. Think about the height of that exhaust pipe, and children in pushchairs, and small children walking by, and people in wheelchairs. They don't want to be breathing in your fumes, and that's contributing to a problem in urban areas. There are new vehicle technologies coming out whereby you've got ways that your engine would turn off when you're stopped in traffic, and that sort of thing. And advanced engine management systems are another improvement. Use of sustainable biofuels. I mean, nowadays there's the possibility of making biodegradable fuels from algae, from seaweed, for example. We don't have to be locked into using fossil fuels. We can then cultivate these things and create fuels from them. Improving your transport infrastructure so that you keep flow of traffic going, so you avoid congestion and the stop-start element of urban transportation. Using intelligent transport systems to plan, but there needs to be a significant investment. We got a bit lazy, I think, and we didn't invest in public transport for a very, very long time. And we should be investing more in our railways. Whether or not HS2 is the answer, I think that's a major discussion for another time. But certainly in local train services and bus services need dramatically improving to help people make that transition, make them less dependent on their car. And then, of course, there are legal instruments you can use to discourage people from driving into cities. Or if you don't like applying congestion charges and taxation, you can then provide them with an incentive to do things differently, such as park and ride. And I really do think, as a city, we should be looking much more seriously at that, and it's been raised many, many times.
And reducing the amount of cars in the city centre. Just like London has their emission zones where you have to pay if you want to be there. If we want to be the environment capital, we need to be putting these measures in place.
Yeah, and sometimes the decisions you take won't be initially popular, but when people start to see the benefits and start to feel the benefits in terms of their health and improved livability in the city, with more pedestrians, more cyclists and fewer vehicles, then I think people will get on board.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might not seem like it at times, but Peterborough actually has a much better cycle route than a lot of other cities. Would you agree?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and I think we should be taking advantage of that.
It is a much better. It's a great resource actually. We've got the Green Wheel and we've got a number of cycle routes. I mean, there are questions around the join up in some places. I think it does need to be revisited. But in terms
as
of
with all infrastructure.
Yeah, but in terms of the mileage of cycle paths, it's a fantastic resource. Let's see it used more.
Yeah, absolutely. And walking, guys, just walk to the shop.
Yeah, and you know what? Walking is a great way of getting that little bit of headspace.
Yeah.
Getting out there. Also, you interact with people. If you're in a car, you're kind of cosseted, aren't you? You're closed into those four walls of metal.
Yeah. You're more likely to get angry with people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I walk every day. I mean, I admit, some people don't have the option with their work might be a long way from home, and they complain public transport is not good enough, and they have to then rely on the car. So I do accept there are challenges there to be met, and it's not for everyone. But if you can start lift sharing, that's a great way.
Yeah.
If we could halve the number of cars by people carpooling, for example.
Yeah. Okay, so that's transport then. Let's move on to food, because we noticed we've got two councillors here, John Holditch and Marco Seresti, who are both going vegan and vegetarian. How does cutting meat out of your diet help reduce your CO2 emissions?
Right, okay. Livestock, your cows, your pigs, your sheep, use up a third of what we call global croplands. And they contribute 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I worked out every 1.8 kilos of beef you eat, and I don't think people eat 1.8 kilos in one go, contributes as much to global warming as a flight between London and New York. Now, 1.8 kilos, I discover, is what the average American consumes in a single month. And I would suggest there are probably people living in the UK who have a very heavily meat-based diet. So anything you can do to reduce the amount of meat, because meat production is not energy efficient and it's taking up land that could be used for producing vegetable matter, is going to be good. Now, as we said at the very start, we're not expecting everyone to go vegan forever overnight.
Yeah.
And, for some people it's more of a challenge than it is for others. Personally, I found it quite easy. I've been a vegetarian for 35 years, something like that. And I'm still transitioning to full-on veganism, but that's my choice. If people want to try doing it in a stepwise fashion, have one meat-free day a week.
Yeah.
I know my daughter's school, they have a meat-free Monday now, so the school dinners don't offer meat on a Monday.
Yeah.
And that's a laudable thing to be doing.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to do, and as you said earlier, Joe, you can discover some fantastic new foods, change your diet, improve your health as well, because a lot of the meat we eat has also got other things added to it, and the production methods involved in producing your burgers and whatever are not necessarily the ones not things that you would want to really be supporting. And I personally don't want to put that sort of stuff in my body. And clearly there are producers out there doing things in the organic way, and that's better, of course. But the argument is still there that meat production is not energy efficient. It takes a lot to convert a certain amount of grass and feed to a certain amount of meat.
Yeah.
It's a major emitter of greenhouse gases. Between 21 and 37% of global emissions come from the food systems we use.
Okay. Right, so cutting down your meat, is there any other amendments to your diet you can make to reduce your CO2?
Sure. One of the things we've all benefited from is the fact that food gets air freighted around the world. You go into any supermarket any time of the year and you can buy tropical fruits, for example. There's no doubt that eating tropical fruits and having lots of vitamin C is good for your health, but it's not great for the planet. We should be looking at what foods we're eating in terms of the food miles. That is how far they've travelled to get onto that supermarket shelf. Because clearly, if you're freighting vast amounts of mangoes from one side of the world to your local supermarket, that has an impact in terms of CO2 emissions from those flights. So eat locally, and also if you've got the opportunity, shop locally as well, because the big supermarkets buy in bulk, they fly stuff in. You can get some, you can if you've got the ability financially to do so, you can pay for what they call a food box, a veg box from local farms, where you get seasonal veg and fruit sent to you. It can sometimes be a challenge knowing what to do with all that cabbage, but again, that's a good way of reducing your food miles and your CO2 emissions.
Absolutely. I have pledged myself to go raw vegan because I quite often go without milk and dairy. So that wouldn't have really been a challenge for me. But raw vegan means you can't. I do enjoy some of the meat substitutes that are out there now, the soya patties and things like that. But I know that those items carry a huge carbon footprint. So I pledged to go raw vegan, which I think means I'm eating carrots all day. Yeah,
that's good for you.
Yeah, absolutely, and some celery. Okay, so that's emissions from food. So lastly, let's talk about emissions from fashion, because the textile industry is a huge emitter of greenhouse gases.
Yeah, actually, I looked into this, and the fashion industry, its emissions all year round are around 8% of the total man-made greenhouse gas emissions, and apparently that's more than aviation and shipping combined. When you start to look into it, where are these emissions coming from? Well, they come from the raw materials, and the bulk of the raw materials in clothing are from fossil fuels, polyester and things like that. And the way in which we produce it and the way in which we produce cotton, to be fair, can have a huge impact. I mean, we're at the moment, we're seeing from the fashion industry 1.7 billion tons of CO2 emitted in a year, and that's only slightly less than the whole of Russia. And polyester, as I say, is made from oil, so extracting and processing it is highly energy intensive. And although the carbon footprint of cotton is less than that of artificial fibres such as polyester, there's a lot of fertilisers, a lot of chemicals used, and a lot of water used in the production of cotton. And some of this releases nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas which has 300 times the warming power of CO2. So it's important we think about the type of materials, but the other thing is what we do with them, because only 20% of fabrics are being recycled at all. The rest of them go into landfill or get incinerated. And the fashion industry has woken up to this more recently, because they've been targeted by climate activists, and they've set out a charter for climate action, and they're saying they're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% in the next 10 years. That's quite an ambitious target. They're going to ensure that they have completely open public reporting of any emissions, so people can challenge them and get them to do more. So there are 4 principles that they've come up with. One is replace, so that's switch the raw materials. So we could move towards recycled polyester, so thereby keeping things in a closed loop. Organic cotton, where less water is used and there are no artificial chemicals added. And one innovative thing is the manufacture of man-made fibres from agricultural waste, which is now becoming a thing. Then there's reduce, making energy savings along what they call the chain. So in the warehouses, stores and offices of fashion companies, saving energy, thinking about how you're transporting your clothes around. Then there's recycle. We should all be reusing rather than throwing away clothes. And a number of high street stores are now offering pick collection points where you could take in your old clothes and hand them back. Another thing which is nice to do as a community activity is to organise a fashion swish, where people they take along their old clothes, and they basically hang them on rails and people swap.
Oh,
nice.
Nice.
A clothes swap, and you can turn it into a fashion show where people put things on and show each other. Great way of bringing the community together, and meaning that those clothes have a longer life. When you're bored with them, give them to someone else, because we've got into this disposable fast fashion culture, and we've got to rethink that, and we've got to adopt a more circular fashion principle where we close the loop and don't just buy and then chuck away after one or two uses.
Yeah, so bottom line is please never throw any textile away. There are textile banks all over Peterborough. There is actually a website with a link. It's got a tool on it where you can type in your postcode and it will tell you all the banks near you, places you can take you type in your postcode and I think you type in the item and it shows you the places where you can go and recycle. I'll post that on the video after the show. Reducing CO2 emissions, what we're saying then is we need to consume less overall, consume less and find ways of reusing what we've got. So there are a couple of organisations and schemes out there who work to do exactly this. Library of Things is one of them. I think you're aware of the Library of Things, Richard. Have you used it before?
There's a Library of Things which was set up in Crystal Palace area in London. I think that was where the first one. I've seen them elsewhere in Frome in Somerset. They've got a rather good one. If you think what the purpose of a library is to go in and borrow books and then take them back. A Library of Things is basically a library of all sorts of tools and bits of equipment or household things.
Things you might need once for a dinner party, maybe.
Yes, and you go in and borrow them, take them out for whatever length of time, then return them again. It's a great idea because I suspect that lots of us have got bits of kitchen equipment and things we don't use sitting at the back of cupboards, and they're there for years on end. And they could be being put to use in this way.
I have. I've been in contact with them actually, and they said they were in conversation with someone or an organisation in Peterborough about opening up a Library of Things here, which is great.
Oh, okay, that's good because I had discussed that a couple of years ago, the idea of setting one up here.
It'd be fantastic. Another thing is Repair Cafe, which is where you take your items, a group of volunteers, you can take your items, an old pair of headphones or something, and they'll repair them for you.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, actually, garden tools are a good one there because there's an awful lot of sheds full of old garden tools that can be repurposed and reused. And again, it brings people together, socialising, and it prevents us exporting all these old electrical items. They often end up in dumps in places in Africa, where young kids are paid a pittance to pull them apart and extract bits of the electrical circuitry, etc., in often very dangerous conditions, and we want to avoid that.
So shukriya, Richard, and thank you for joining us today. Remember, if you missed any of today's show or you simply want to listen again, you can catch up on the Salam Radio Facebook or YouTube. A few more things just before we go. Tomorrow is the first ever Peterborough Climate Action Day. So please recycle, compost, buy eco-friendly, walk, bike, consume less. We'll be here in 2 weeks' time. Thank you and goodbye.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.